The original 12 Star Wars action figures from Kenner are legendary, and their reputation is rivaled only by the second wave in 1979, which was predominantly populated by Cantina aliens: Walrus Man, Hammerhead, Greedo, Snaggletooth, and infamously, Blue Snaggletooth with the big silver boots. However, the Cantina was so jam-packed with aliens that we saw in the 1977 original film that as kids we wondered why more weren't made. And Kenner might have come to the same conclusion given how much attention they lavished on Jabba's palace denizens in 1983 and 1984. But Kenner never went back to revisit the Cantina characters even in the Power of the Force range in 1985. So it's little surprise that when the Star Wars action figure range relaunched in 1995 with Power of the Force 2, the denizens of the Cantina were immediately demanded, even going so far as to have Lucasfilm's Star Wars Insider magazine run an exclusive figure set of the Cantina band, which Kenner never made. And that's probably why fan makers today are so focused on the Cantina sequence from the Star Wars trilogy, because there are so many lost characters there to mine and things to create. The Next 17, the maker of the Efont I reviewed a few years ago, has taken on the challenge, and he's decided to put together a small grouping of Cantina aliens in the Kenner style that never got made.
We don't serve their kind here.
What?
Your droids. They'll have to wait outside. We don't want them here.
The first one I definitely need to mention is Dr. Evazan, who was made in the Power of the Force 2 line in the 90s, but he was never made in a retro Kenner style, even now. Hasbro has not done that. They've done Tarkin, but they haven't done anybody like Dr. Evazan. The Next 17 Dr. Evazan comes with a nice soft goods vest, and he comes with a drinking glass. You might think that because Kenner always put characters with blasters, that a drinking cup would be a weird choice. But Dr. Evazan is a Cantina denizen, and we know he's an obnoxious drunk, not just from the film, but also from the Robot Chicken sketch.
He doesn't like you.
So it only makes sense that Evazan comes with an alcohol glass rather than a gun. He pairs very well with the vintage Walrus Man, and it's nice to have them both to put in the Cantina playset. Next up, we have another familiar face from the Cantina, Feltashan. Now, he's that twin-horned alien that sat having a conversation in the back of a dimly lit booth in the Cantina, and he was only seen in a few shots. He comes with a new blaster accessory that seems to have been designed by Next 17 themselves. And while Feltashan is definitely a character that got no active screen time whatsoever, he is part of that grand Kenner tradition in this range for creating characters where you can imagine new adventures. So it's really great to have this character as a playable action figure in your Kenner Star Wars collection. Last up for the Cantina aliens that I was able to acquire, we have... What's his... I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his name. Something like... Rem Lazar?
Good morning.
Rem, you're alive!
Hem. His name is Hem. Yeah, Hem. You gotta remember, when we were kids as Gen X, we did not have licensed names for these characters. They had names like Hammerhead, Walrus Man, Squidhead. They didn't have these fancy names they have now, like Ponda Baba and Momon Adon and Salt Marae and all this kind of stuff that people can put a trademark next to and say, I'll sue you if you use this name. We didn't have that back then. So it's kind of hard sometimes, especially, to remember the license names for characters that never had a Kenner figure to begin with. And he is definitely one of those. But Hem is famous. Hem is the first Cantina alien you ever see when that music starts. You all know the shot, the head pops up and the music begins, and yet he never got a Kenner action figure. And like Feltashan, Hem didn't have anything really beyond a head. Feltashan at least had shoulders to go with his head. Hem just had his head and his neck. So all of this has to be designed from the neck down, which was Kenner's challenge back then with a lot of these characters, which is why blue Snaggletooth was an error. And then they had to change it to the red Snaggletooth, which also gets weirder because technically red Snaggletooth is a holiday special character, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. I think it's awesome that Next 17 took the step to try and create bodies for these characters. However, this is where I need to make mention of the fact that in order to get these characters made, Next 17 did some reuse. Next 17 offered up Wooher, the bartender. Now, I was not able to get Wooher, and I definitely want to try and pick him up at some point. But it seems like the body was designed specifically for Wooher, and then Next 17 went ahead and created different arms and obviously different head sculpts to swap out and then put different paint schemes on the figures to create Feltashan, Dr. Evazan, adding a soft goods vest, and then Hem. Now, what makes Hem really pop apart from the other characters, even though he has a reused body, is that his paint scheme with the brown and the black and then this amazing soft goods cape really make him look like a rich Kenner figure. He looks great. He comes with that same unique blaster that Feltashan comes with. He just looks like the kind of action figure that would have gotten packaged in, say, the 1985 Power of the Force line. And that's always the question with these artisan figures, whether you're talking about Stan Solo or Next 17. If you're doing figures from the earlier films, Star Wars Empire Strikes Back, do you take the tack of, well, I'm going to make them as if they were made in 79 to 1982. I'm not going to apply Power of the Force aesthetics to them. Or do you take the other tactic, which is I'm thinking chronologically and assuming that these figures never got made at that time, because literally they did not. So I'm going to sculpt and create them with the mindset that these are 1986 and 1987 Power of the Force Lost Wave Kenner figures. It's a balance beam to walk, and a lot of it has to do with your level of nostalgia for one version of the Kenner sculpting style philosophy or another. Do you like the earliest, simplest designs, or do you like that middle ground from the Empire and earliest Jedi years, or do you like the full-on 85 revision where they were starting to get pretty detailed with a lot of soft goods and all that kind of stuff? Hem kind of rides that line. You know, Evazan has the soft goods vest, which you could argue is definitely a Power of the Force lean. But overall, he still reflects a 1979 figure aside from that small vest. Hem, on the other hand, with his more rich paint scheme and the more intricate soft goods cape, he could be a Power of the Force with a coin figure, I feel. But he does still work in a 1979 second year Kenner run capacity. Now, detouring from the Cantina very briefly, I do want to mention that Next 17 has continued trying to flesh out Jabba's Palace's denizens as well. He's moved on from Ifant Mon. He's done a few other characters from Jabba's Palace. They're like those tusked guys. I haven't been able to pick those up yet, but I was able to pick up Hermiodal, which is admittedly one of the goofier aliens that George Lucas and crew produced for Jabba's Palace. He's in the background. He's a big sort of hulking thing. And I think that Next 17 did well with the sculpt as far as trying to translate what that might have looked like in a Kenner style. Hermie is not necessarily my bag as far as Star Wars figures that I would like to see, done in the Kenner style, because I'm more of a, Star Wars 77 and Empire guy. And I've done Star Wars Follies videos in the past talking about how annoying it got as a kid with the Jabba's Palace thing, because if there's one group of aliens that I feel got properly represented by the Kenner action figure line, it was Jabba's denizens. They got more than enough screen time. They beat out the Ewoks for the number of figures they got to represent their cadre. So that being said, I do feel that Hermie is going to be one of those stretch goal figures for people. You either have to really like Jabba's palace and that's what you want to focus on, or you're like me where you've already completed your Kenner collection and now you're just happy to start fleshing out those missing slots. You want to start grabbing those figures that never got made to really start to build out your cast of characters. Over the past few years, I have watched these artisan figure makers really start to flesh out Tatooine and the Cantina itself with the cast of characters and even some of the vehicles that were in the background that we never got from Kenner. It's amazing to see what these independent toy makers are doing. And to just look at the lineup of Tatooine / Cantina related figures that have come from these custom makers, all together with the original Kenner products as well. It's beyond any kid's wildest dreams who was part of Gen X. And to just see the diorama come to life, it's amazing. It's so cool. And I can't express enough what a thrill it is to see these characters finally slot in to these play sets where when we were children, all we could do was kind of dream of, oh, it'd be cool if they made that, or, you know, it'd be cool if they made that big white furry guy, or it would be really cool if they made those two twin sisters that were at the bar, you know, stuff like that. It'd be really cool if they did that. But to finally see that happening 40 plus years later is amazing. It's really amazing. And the fact that it keeps going, like it hasn't stopped. There hasn't been like a fad spike and then it was over. It's just been building. And that's really exciting for Star Wars Kenner collectors like myself who love the original stuff the way it looked. We're fine with 5 POA. We're fine with simpler sculpting. We're fine with simpler accessories. It's awesome. It is so cool to see what could have been starting to land in and around what was. And that's the achievement of makers like the Next 17. Is there a little bit of disappointment that the body was reused so many times? A little bit. There's a little bit of disappointment there. Just a little bit, not a lot, because he did make different arms and different heads, and the paint schemes are really strong, and the soft goods are all different, so the configurations are all different. In some cases, I think it makes sense, like with Wooher and Feltashan as an example. Evazan, there might have been a little bit more of a unique leg sculpt they could have done with him. But with a lot of these characters, they were just puppet heads. They were just like alien puppet heads, like Hem and Feltashan. There are other figures on the Next 17 website that I don't have yet that are also from the Cantina. The Wolfman, the Devilman guy, they also seem to be sharing this same body. And I understand that's probably how this company was able to afford getting a steel mold made to get factory quality. In certain ways, though, I feel like, say with Hem, for example, given his alien race, when he was part of the West End Games miniatures sets, he was always, sculpted with these kind of like, I don't want to call them monster feet, but they were far more alien looking feet that were similar to Hammerhead's feet. And when I saw these figures, I was like, yeah, Kenner might have interpreted this way, but I wonder if Kenner would have interpreted, from the calves down, just doing Hammerhead's legs somewhat to give him a little bit more of that alien look, reusing some parts or sections of parts or sculpting to give it a little bit of an extra something. That's not a slam at Next 17 at all, because to get into the artisan figure game, it is a massive amount of personal investment and overhead and time and, getting steel molds and everything like that. It can't be easy, is what I'm saying. And if I've learned anything from Valaverse with Action Force and everything like that, and that guy's, a professional out there making bubbled action figures, sending them out in large numbers, even he has to think about reuse for a certain percentage of his products. So that's modern toy making. I get that. What has been made is of quality. And I think that's what's most important. My aesthetic thoughts on it as a Monday morning quarterback, or even not knowing what the investment increase would be to say, give him Hammerhead's lower legs or something like that. That's just me thinking about, well, maybe if it looked like this. So I freely admit that I don't know what the overhead cost on that would be for an artisan maker. For a big company, it'd be nothing. They'd be like, yeah, it's fine, whatever, because we're about to churn out 50,000 of these, but that's not the case here. So not knowing the full score, you know, I'm hesitant to, you know, sit there and say this was a certainty if only they had just gone another 5 feet. Overall, though, they are very Kenner. They look great in the Cantina display. They look great in the Cantina playset, and I can't wait to see what Next 17 does next. So thanks for watching this, and I'll see you on the next video.